Welcome to the Porch Roof Classic, a retro baseball podcast novel in 15 or so episodes by Jeff Pullman. Episode 15. When David Mulaney invented the wiffle ball at his Fairfield, Connecticut home in 1953, he likely knew the plastic wouldn't sustain repeated whackings. These days, they would call that planned obsolescence. In 1970, we went with the more informal term, cheap crap. On the other hand, splitting a ball open was not only an expected event, and why we usually bought 3 wiffles at a time, but a frequent badge of manly honor. Scotty Vezzo had long been the Paul Bunyan of our ball-splitting lore, but on this day, Danny Blight's roof shots were threatening the legend. Which is why Robbie emerged from the house with an armload of unopened wiffle ball boxes and was cheered mightily by the porch lunchers. Mom had put 3 plates of tuna sandwiches on the table with an assortment of soda cans. The Dannies hogged most of the available seats, while I hunkered with Izzy and Jean at the far end. Helen and my deli amigos paced around with their food. "What's this green junk in my sandwich?" asked Mick with a frown. "Celery," I said. "Got a problem with that?" "You might live a year longer if you eat a vegetable once in a while," added Helen. "Gee, thanks, Mom. Where the hell'd you come from anyway?" "Not the cauldron of hell that you're from." "She's from Newton," I said. "That figures," said Danny between Pepsi glugs. "The Eastern Front, loser Red Sox country." "We won the pennant 3 years ago, stupid," shouted Robbie. "Who asked you?" said Mick. "Right," said Danny, "and then the crappy Cardinals smoked your hole." Tomas turned and approached him with blood in his eyes. "You making joke of Orlando Cepeda?" "Back off, man." "You back off, okay? You couldn't wear Baby Bull's underwear." "The 67 Sox won the most exciting pennant race ever," I said. "Right, Robbie?" "4 teams tied for first on September 6th, he answered, right on cue. "Yeah, and they lost the World Series," said Danny, "so who cares?" Helen polished off her sandwich, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and strolled over to Danny. The porch got very quiet. "You're going to lay that misguided swill on us, Skippy? Why do you think America is so screwed up?" "What are you even talking? Because we stole the country from the Indians and just haven't stopped. All we want to do is win this and win that, own this and own that. It's a sickness. Well, guess what? Boston finishing a close second that year was just as fabulous, maybe more. You know why? Because it's heroic to just miss. How many times have your boring Yankees won now? 10? 20, Danny said, the number burned into his brain with a soldering iron. "Well, I hope those make you happy." She walked away. Danny burped loudly in her direction, then looked at his teammates. His eyes had become glowing cinders. "We ready for Armageddon?" Maybe it was Mark Twain who said, "If you don't like the weather in New England, wait a minute." Well, that minute had shown up. The wind suddenly rotated 180 degrees like a drunk on a bar stool. Gusts up to 35 miles an hour blew in from the north, shot over the roof and into our faces. "Whoa!" yelled Izzy as his cap flew off. He had to run halfway to the Bickerstein bushes to fetch it. "Jesus!" screamed Mick. "Didn't you guys watch the frickin' weather report?" "We did. They lied." "Who the heck can play in this crap?" asked Izzy. "Wind shift index is at 71.7, yelled Helen from the porch. "Very troublesome." "Who cares?" said Danny. "No way we're wussing out. We're down by 1 run and we're starting our comeback onslaught now, even if it's a frickin' hurricane." "Fine with me," I said, and deliciously wondered what the new wind direction would do to my pitches. A late summer storm of some kind was on its way, and clumpy clouds appeared on the north horizon, dark and fusing together. Mick was first up, and he dug into the box so deep his front foot must have stuck out in China. The gust turned my first pitch into a ridiculous floater, and he whacked the snot out of it. But the ball got about 30 feet toward the porch roof, died in midair, blew back, and landed in my glove on the pitcher's mound. "No fair!" he screamed. "Same wind for us, doofus," said Jean. It was comical. No one on either team could even come close to hitting a deep ball, and the only base runners were on singles and a couple of errors. The score remained 20-19 us for a couple more innings. Rain hadn't fallen yet, but the sky was so dark it was getting harder to see the pitches. "We need stadium lights," cried Izzy jokingly. "Hey, I can make that happen," said Danny. "Got a cousin who runs the tennis courts at Marsh Meadow Country Club, and they have these big lights on wheels. They move around if people want to practice after hours." "Thanks, but don't bother," I said. "We still got an hour at least of daylight." "Yeah, but this ain't good," said Izzy. "It's the dumb wind more than the light," said Jean. "Let's keep going." "What the heck inning is it?" asked Stan. "Starting the ninth," yelled Helen, rushing out with Robbie to tack up belated zero cards on the top and bottom of the eighth. "Jean, Izzy, and Joey all have a plus 1,000 pinch factor." "What about me?" asked Danny. "Only keeping track of the Joeys. Sorry." Danny flared a nostril at her. The gusts were still wicked, and nobody scored that inning either. Fat gobs of rain began to fall, enough to cool us all down, but not enough to stop the game. "Hold up a second," shouted Helen all of a sudden, and ducked into the house at my mom's request. "Pitch the dumb ball," said Danny from the batter's box. "Hang on, she's our statistical expert and we need her." Helen reappeared on the porch seconds later, accompanied by three guys slightly older than her, all with long hair, beards, or mustaches, and wearing backpacks. "Some friends of mine from home stopped by. Mind if they watch the game?" We all shrugged. They had carried one of the benches from the porch table out into the yard and positioned it by the fence in deep left center. "Hey, that's fair territory," yelled Mick. One of the guys flashed a peace symbol, and they looked around for another option. Helen came out to advise, and before you knew it, one guy was helping another onto the low porch roof with the help of the bench. A minute later, they had created their own bleacher section, huddled in a long-haired mass atop the garage wall. "Go, Joey's guys!" yelled one of them with a raised fist. "Hippie freaks," muttered Danny, and stepped back up to the plate, swung like a madman, and another ball hit the wind wave and dropped into another mitt. The tuna fish had upset Izzy's stomach, and we had to take a 10-minute break while he went to the bathroom in the house. I had no clue who these mystery friends of Helen's were, but I figured those empty Chinese food cartons I found in the trash the other day were connected. While they sat on the roof, they muttered to each other a lot and seemed to be sharing a yellow cigarette. "How long is this game going?" asked Mom from the kitchen window. "Until it's over," I answered. "Don't worry about dinner." "I'm more worried about the neighbors. A couple already called me about the racket you're making." "Okay, we'll try and keep it down. Hear that, guys?" "You're the one yelling," said Mick. My arm now hurt a little, but the thought of losing the game to Danny was far more painful. With the gusts knocking down every one of their hits, it wasn't too much of a concern. But suddenly the rain gobs stopped. The wind died a bit, and a sliver of setting sun broke through the clouds to the west. "Thank you, God," said Mick's brother, and in less than 2 minutes, the Dannies had scored 3 times with a flurry of singles and doubles to take a 22-20 lead. Down to our final 3 outs of the game, I called for a team meeting at home plate. "Okay, this is it," I said, for lack of anything else to say. "You don't think we know?" said Jean. "Yeah, rah-rah, up the wazoo and all that," said Izzy, "but I say we score 3 times to put these turds away. This game goes any longer, Joey's arm's going to fall off." "I'm okay." "You don't look it. Without that freaky wind, you'd be back in your sling." "Let's just smoke 'em, amigos," said Jesus, and stalked to the plate with his bat. Mick's brother had pitched the last 2 innings and was on for another. Jesus ripped the first pitch through his brother's legs and was at second base before Stan even retrieved the ball. "Shut 'em down, Dannies!" Jamie and Cindy had been crouched under some bushes during the rain and were out of them now and obnoxious again. "Never say no-y, Joeys," yelped Robbie. Tomas grounded to Chicopee Dan for the first out, with Jesus taking third. Jean then singled him in, but Izzy dribbled to first, and it was all up to me. Through the porch screen, I could see Helen and Robbie with their hands and faces pressed against it, pleading. Jean stood on the upside-down frisbee we were using for second base, mouthed the words, "You can do it," over and over. Danny wasn't about to give up this moment, though. He walked to the mound to take the ball again. Batting lefty wasn't going to work for me this time. Screw the pain. I waited until he was ready to throw, then hopped across the plate to hit right-handed. "Like we're scared now," said Mick. Even my little practice swings hurt. If it was one of those old Hollywood movies, I would have whipped a flask of bourbon out of my back pocket and swigged it down, or Jean would have tossed me the bottle from second base. I let the first 3 pitches whiz by, and one of them pretty meaty. Enough window shopping. Swing already. Shut up, Mick. Danny's next delivery was meant to be inside, but swerved a bit too far over the plate. I grimaced and swung violently. The ball whistled on a line to left field. Dan loped toward it, but tripped over his own sneaker laces at the last second and tumbled to the ground. The ball bounced off his cap and went behind him. Yes! Shouted Izzy as Gene yahooed and raced home with the tying run. Danny was livid, struck Jesus out on 3 pitches, and that was that. We were going extras. Hey, man, what period is this? It was one of Helen's stoner pals on the roof. All of them were on their backs with their knees up, obviously more interested in the swirling clouds than anything we were doing. Going to the 10th inning, said Gene from left field, if you know what that is. Damn, don't cop an attitude, man. It actually was starting to get dark, which I figured was a good time to increase the speed on my sling balls. Danny got a double off one, but the other 3 guys I faced went down easy. Swinging the bat did something to my arm, but it was a good thing. For some reason, it didn't hurt when I sidearmed my pitches, and hurt even less when I really submarined them. Danny was also up to the ferocious task. He whipped his pitches in like plastic laser beams, with almost no pause between them. Gene, Izzy, and me didn't have a chance. Then one of my sling balls flew up at the last second and nailed Danny on the chin. He was more surprised than anything, flipped his bat away in disgust, and started for the back porch. Where you going? I asked. Calling my cousin at the club before somebody gets hurt. Where's your telephone? He'll get those lights here in no time if no one's using them. Where's your stupid phone? In the kitchen. No one wanted to back down, and no one wanted to postpone the game. So we shifted back to the porch for another unscheduled break. Mom had thought ahead and ordered boxes of popsicles. Robbie prepared his 3rd score sheet. Even Helen's bohemian pals came down from the roof. You guys can lose heroically, said Helen, giving my shoulders a comforting little rub. I know you can. We're not the 67 Sox, Robbie reminded her. They had a deep bench with Dalton Jones and Hawk Harrelson. I know, Robbie. Just trying to get your brother to relax a bit. Danny blew back onto the porch, grabbed a lemon-lime pop. Kyle will have lights here in about 20 minutes. Then we can stomp you once and for all. Oh, like you're stomping us now? Asked Helen. Danny slid the popsicle into his repulsive maw and bit off its head. Yellow and green juice dripped off his lips. Wow, you sure talk a lot for someone who's afraid to play. She's not afraid of anything, I said. She's just real smart and knows we're better off if she's just our math coach. Danny scoffed. Not buying it, Tosh. I say Miss Professor Einstein here is terrified to play against us. You think so? Asked Helen. She let go of my shoulders and stepped right up to his colorful, gooey mouth. Grab a bat, dickface. He was silent for a long second, then peered around at his astonished Dannies and worked up an arrogant grin. Glad to, honey. The lights arrived in the back of a pickup truck driven by 2 country club maintenance guys wearing polo shirts with armpit stains. They were the oversized flood type, mounted on poles, and weren't that tall, but would do the trick. After we helped them run electric cords into the porch and plug them in, the field was semi-ablaze. Hoots and hollers filled the air, and a far out man echoed down from the garage roof bleachers, where Helen's friends had clambered back up. It wasn't like we needed the lights. There was so much kinetic energy in the yard after Helen's challenge to Danny that the game lit itself. Don't throw anything over the plate to him, I said in her ear, cracking open a new ball box for her. She took the thing and swatted me away like a gnat. Not now, Joseph. Just watch and learn. I retreated to first base, ready for whatever lesson she was concocting. Robbie had loaned Helen his puny Red Sox cap that was perched atop her raven mane like a doily. Gloveless, she stared at the plastic ball in her hand, turned it this way and that, studied its vertical slats. Yes, it's a ball, said Danny, wiggled the skinny yellow bat for an impending one-armed launch. Now throw it. Why? Returned Helen. What did this ball ever do to you? Excuse me? Seriously. It came off the assembly line or out of the plastic ball machine at... She squinted at its tiny copyright lettering, made more legible by a dirt smudge. the Whammo factory, eager to be enjoyed by some innocent little kids. And here you are, a big, strong high school freshman, just wanting to pulverize it. Shut up and pitch already, yelled Mick. Helen wouldn't move. And it makes you so impatient and upset when someone's keeping you from your pulverizing, right? Danny rolled his eyes, stepped out of the box for one moment, and Helen chucked the ball at him without a windup. Startled, Danny tried to ready himself, but swung off balance and late and missed it by a country foot. Me, Izzy, Jean, Robbie, and the amigos whooped in unison. Danny was livid and dug his feet into the box, pounded his bat on the plate. Give me that same fat one, sweetie, and say sayonara. Which one? You mean this? Tried to quick pitch him, but Danny was ready and flattened the thing on a mammoth arc to left field. He dropped the bat and went into his home run gallop to the cheers of his entourage, but a rogue gust curved the ball to the left of the garage, where it dropped straight down into foul grass. Damn it! He screamed. Isn't that a shame? Said Helen. And there you were, ready to teach me a lesson. When Jean tossed back the ball he had crushed, she caught it with her bare hand. Too bad I throw like a girl, huh? Spun and floated the thing back to the plate in one motion. It hung in the air like a kite. Danny raced back for his bat, cocked it, and completely missed the ball for strike 3. Whipped the bat into the bushes and nearly took off Jamie's head. Helen gave her opponent a dramatic bow, then sashayed back to her perch on the porch. Glowing, I returned to the mound to face Chicopee Stan, who was digging in to no doubt make us pay. Then there was a whole new interruption. A 2-man local television crew appeared, one guy toting a giant video camera on his shoulder. Holy crap, cried Gene. What the heck is this? Whoa, said Danny, snapping out of his funk. I don't believe it. My cousin again. His best friend works at Channel 22, where they're always looking for goofy local stories. He definitely tipped them off. He tossed back his hair, straightened the collar of his polo, as the crew began to film snippets of the game from behind third base, and after Jamie and Cindy quickly fixed their hair, Danny and I resumed our high-speed pitching. Even though we could see the balls much better and runners reached bases, the teams were still unable to score. I was locked into a pitching death match with my arch enemy, and it was downright exhilarating. It was about the top of the 12th when we noticed curious people wandering around the side of the house to form a new fan section down the left field line. These were neighbors. Some I recognized, some not. Kids on bikes. A few even brought folding chairs. Obviously, they had been watching Channel 22. Is this a gas or what? Said Izzy. Gene recognized a cute girl from his homeroom, adjusted his belt, and winked at her on his way to left field. Pitch it, nerd, yelled Mick from home plate. Try hitting it, Toad, I yelled back and capsized the next pitch, nearly scraping my knuckles on the ground. The ball did the boogaloo, twist, and the freaking hokey-pokey on the way to missing his bat. The next delivery was even more surreal, and he poofed it in the air 2 feet to my right. I got Danny out on a pop fly, whiffed Stan, and bang, we were coming up with another chance to win. Suddenly, flashing blue lights shot over the house from the front yard. Now what? If the tennis court floods weren't already half blinding us, we might have thought they were flashes of late summer lightning. But there was Officer Jimmy Schmidt, inching around the side of the house and looking way too TV copish. Stopped a few yards from the field, got on his little walkie-talkie for a second, and then hell poured in. 5 or 6 state troopers, armed and ready for whoop-ass, appeared from every shadowy corner of the yard. We were too shocked to respond, but up on the roof, just above the peak of the garage, there was rapid movement. Helen's hippie friends had dropped to their bellies and were trying to scoot backwards to the other side of the house. Get out of here, Chuck, shouted Helen, exploding from the porch. The cops had already spotted them, though, and were running back around to the front yard. We dropped our balls and bats and gloves and followed them in a bewildered pack. Chuck and whoever his radical buddies were had handcuffs on and were being searched with their faces pinned to a couple of state police cars. Helen had become a madwoman, held back by one of the troopers. You have no right to arrest them! They were seen leaving a bombing at a state police station in Waltham, miss. I think we do. All we could do, along with my parents, Robbie, and half the neighborhood, was stare at the bizarre scene. Dad finally grew some nuts and walked over to Helen. You know these guys? He asked her. They're friends of mine, and they were at a protest rally in Boston, but wouldn't bomb anything, I know it. Okay, but why did you invite... Let go of them! She wriggled away from the trooper who had her, charged the other ones. Stay out of this, miss. Eat me! You won't get away with this, fascists! 10 seconds later, they had her in handcuffs, too, shoved her into the back seat of the state police car behind the one with her friends. They roared away with their lights still flashing, and all of the air in the front yard got sucked away with them. Officer Schmidt holstered his weapon, gingerly approached my father. Sorry, Mr. Tosh. Someone spotted the suspects on the local news and called the Stadies. Did they say anything about this bombing in Waltham to you? Huh? I don't know about a bombing. This was the first time I've ever laid eyes on these people. The guys, I mean. He spun and looked at me, almost by instinct. How about you, Joey? Same thing. What my dad said. Uh-huh, said Schmidt, as unconvinced as ever. Again, sorry to disturb you. He got into his Marshmeadow cruiser and drove away. My mother came outside in her robe with her hair up in a towel, glanced around at the gawking neighbors on hand. What's all this? Joey's friend and some of her friends are in trouble, said Dad, heading back to the house. I'll try and make a few calls. But what happened? Let me make my calls. The TV crew quickly got in their van and followed the police cars, obviously shifting their coverage to the big crime story. The rest of us stared at each other a moment in a confused fog, then turned and trudged back around to the field. You've been listening to The Porch Roof Classic by Jeff Pullman. This retro baseball podcast novel was made possible by Spotify for podcasters and Buzzsprout. Be sure to basket catch another episode next week. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to contribute, go to buymeacoffee.com/jpullman54v. Thanks.